Because like I said, I told George before that probably we'll stay with Heraclitus, I was thinking. Also because it's a bit late, but besides that, I mean, when I was preparing today, I realized that there is so much material, already with Heraclitus. We don't have to rush, right?
No, yeah.
So no Parmenides, no?
Right, next time. I mean, maybe we'll touch on Parmenides at the end of class. Maybe we'll see how it goes. Otherwise, next time we don't have to rush, right? So, so we finish with Heraclitus because there is so much to say. I mean, we started last time, but what I wanted to do today was both, continue the reading of the fragments, the testimonial, the passages about Heraclitus, and also get into what Hegel says, right? I mean, because we have been doing this before, and also a wonderful passage, an important passage in Heidegger, about one of the fragments, the moments in Heraclitus. Maybe I start with a general review also of what we have done so far, because again, the Presocratics and their contemporary relevance, we started with the main question, right? I mean, what is it that the Presocratics ask, right? I mean, Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes of the Milesian school, right? They give different answers to this question, but fundamentally they made that hypothesis that there might be something, an underlying substance which remains the same, right, while things change, and this would be the arche, and right, the arche, there was water for Thales, the aperon, the boundless, indeterminate. That was the problem that Hegel then saw in Anaximander. Indefinite, indeterminate, and infinite. And then Anaximenes says it is air, right, which is still aperon, boundless, but it is determinate. We know what it is. And then we got from there into Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans. We actually spent a lot of time following, especially Hegel, on Pythagoras and the question of numbers. We spoke so much last time about. Very interesting, issue of, and then from there we move to Zeno. So for Pythagoras, numbers would be the answer to the same question: what is it? Basically, the underlying reality, the nature of things, and we stress that also with a passage from Aristotle that it is really what things are, right? I mean, it's not like it's not a number stand for, it's not a symbol kind of situation, symbolic, right? But it is really what things are, numbers, right? And then we went into Xenophanes that Hegel introduces as the first of the Eleatic school, to which we'll go back next time, probably with Parmenides, because today, like I said, maybe we'll stay with Heraclitus, but the Eleatic school, although Xenophanes was not from Elea himself, but he is included in terms of philosophy. There is this idea of the one, first of all, that Hegel also stressed. Actually, Hegel made the link between Xenophanes in this respect and Spinoza. So this one, which is not a numeric one, it's not one and then 2, 3 and so on, but it is ultimately not even one. It's not one in the sense of a number, but it is what then for Spinoza will be the one substance, which is God or nature. But in any case, we saw this with Xenophanes. So when he speaks of one, even God, it's not God in the sense of the monotheistic, the Judeo-Christian, right, and then Islamic tradition, but it is something completely different. Hegel himself uses the word pantheism in reference also to Spinoza in order to describe what Xenophanes is also doing. But in any case, this one then will come back as being the sphere of being in Parmenides. Again, because we are following Patricia Kerr, the order that she is in the reader, right? So we now do Heraclitus and then go back to Parmenides and Zeno briefly as well, okay? So Heraclitus, we started last time, we saw how Well, I mean, Heraclitus is usually considered like the thinker of becoming and change, whereas then Parmenides is usually understood as he is the thinker of permanence, right, being. So everything changes for Heraclitus, nothing changes for Parmenides. But we saw how both Hegel, Heidegger, how there is also a traditional thinking that says, well, ultimately they are not really, speaking about two different things, but ultimately the same from a different point of view. So we saw some of the fragments or testimonia in Heraclitus, and I want to go back maybe to, what I want to do today is combine the reading of some of these fragments with perhaps the comments that Hegel makes, and then also what Heidegger says about one of the fragments, right? And actually, maybe why don't we start with that? I mean, we don't have to follow the order that we have in the reader, but again, we had a question about the editions, right? This would be 106. Number 106 in the second edition.
Number 106. We could share it. I have to find it.
What?
106.
You lost something?
The book is here.
Oh.
Who's the...
Oh, I
So
found it.
it's
A person's character?
right. This
Okay.
one.
You have it? Okay.
B119. You find it? So
disease? No.
no?
Not about disease, right? Okay. Those who speak with understanding.
Oh no, then I will get into that later. But it's a person's character is his divinity.
B119.
Yeah, B119.
Maybe you don't have it.
Sorry, which page is it? Which page is it?
On the PDF, it's 67.
It's not there.
Page 52 in the book.
No? You find it? Okay, so but in any case, it's this
One of the first ones.
easy. I mean, it's very simple. No, a person's character. Is I don't know if I did mention also Heidegger in the list of readings that, but I brought actually the book, but this is from a letter on humanism.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, if you don't have the text, I can read just a few lines. And but Tony, you find it?
Maybe it's not, I don't think it's in.
No, I think it is.
It starts with a
towards
person's
the
character.
end.
Oh, towards the end.
I mean, in my edition, is towards the end.
Guardian spirit.
Okay. So, but maybe in the
Yeah, read
meantime
it.
I do. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just read.
So, but in any case, this is the usual translation, right? A person's character,
Yeah,
you find it, is his divinity or a guardian spirit, daimon. Okay. So, but what Heidegger says in Letter on Humanism, and I read, okay, the saying of Heraclitus, fragment 119, goes, and he gives the Greek, first of all, ethos, anthropoi, daimon, right? Ethos, character, anthropoi of a human being, daimon, spirit, right? So this is usually translated, so this is more or less what he did with Anaximander as well, Heidegger, right? Because then he gives us his translation. This is usually translated precisely, quote, a man's character is his daimon, spirit. This translation thinks in a modern way, not a Greek one. Ethos means abode, yeah. Dwelling place.
Abode, yeah.
Abode, yes. The word names the open region in which man dwells, right? So it's the open region of his abode allows what pertains to man's essence and what in thus arriving resides in nearness to him to appear. The abode of man contains and preserves the advent of what belongs to man in his essence. According to Heraclitus' phrase, this is daimon, the God. Right? So the fragment says man dwells insofar as he is man in the nearness of God. A story that and then he gets into another story about Heraclitus that I read as well. That's really interesting. So he says,
Repeat that last one.
Which one?
Man dwells.
Man dwells insofar as he is man in the nearness of God.
Okay.
So then he says that a story that Aristotle reports in another book, on the parts of animals, okay, agrees with this fragment of Heraclitus. The story is told of something Heraclitus said to some strangers. This is from Aristotle's book, who wanted to come visit him. Having arrived, they saw him warming himself at a stove. Surprised, they stood there in consternation. Above all, because he encouraged them, the astounded ones, and called for them to come in with the words, and these are the words that Heraclitus told his visitors, for here too the gods are present. Okay, which is very interesting in many ways. I mean, the idea that the gods are present everywhere, and so he says the story certainly speaks for itself. But then ultimately, what he says is that that the fact that they found, that the people found, the visitors found Heraclitus by a stove, is interesting in the sense he says, Heidegger, again he repeats what Heraclitus says, here too the gods are present, and then he says, I'm reading from the next page, this phrase places the abode, and this time he gives the abode as ethos, so instead of character, ethos is the dwelling place. So there is this big, great, important shift in Heidegger's interpretation of ethos, right, which usually is understood as precisely character, from which then ethics comes, but he says it is the dwelling place, right? So this phrase places the ethos, the abode of the thinker and his deed in another light. So whether the visitors understood this phrase at once or at all, and then saw everything differently in this other light, the story doesn't say. But, basically, Heidegger's conclusion, right? I mean, what he gets from this is, he says then, Heraclitus himself says, again, he repeats the fragment, ethos, anthropoi, daimon, but he gives us the new translation, his translation, which is the familiar, what is familiar, which is the abode, the ethos, therefore, is for the human being, for man, the open region for the presensing of God, for the unfamiliar one. So he's playing with the notion of the familiar and the unfamiliar, right, I mean, so there is this nearness of the God, basically everywhere, right, in the dwelling place, the open region, okay? So this is Heidegger's interesting interpretation of this passage, this fragment. I don't know if you want to say anything, I mean, if there are any comments or... but it's really interesting. I mean, I have used it often in writing because, I think it gives also, among other things, I mean, it gives it's a very interesting take on the question of ethics in general, right? I mean, ethos as the dwelling place, right, which is, again, not simply the plate, the stove, it's not only the house, the home where one lives, but it is also, of course, we can think of this in general, is the planet, the earth, I mean, the dwelling place of the human being, and the open, ultimately, the open place, right? Yes. So in any case, I mean, because we started with this again. I don't know if there are comments or any. So I wanted to maybe read another interesting. There are many. One other very interesting fragment, which is ultimately about singularity. This is number 44 for our edition, and still the same Stodeus. It's B115. You find that?
15?
B115, right. Okay. So, this one says, the soul has a self-increasing logos. So, I don't know if you want to say anything about this, but the soul has a self-increasing logos. Can be understood, then I should say what that is really singularity, as right, the soul, the psyche, therefore right, has the logos. Remember that we saw for Heidegger especially is the gathering, right? And I think that Hegel says the connection, but in any case the gathering of the psyche, therefore, is self-increasing, which I believe is very interesting in light also of the way I see it, the difference between the notion of individuality and that of singularity, right? I mean, the individual is a definite and ultimately false, fictional entity, right, separate from the rest, complete, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas the singular is something which is open and which is, self-increasing, goes back, I don't know if you recall, but a few weeks ago I spoke about that amplification of force, right? That ultimately, remember that I made a reference to, right, this idea of power, right? I mean, there is this singularity which is constantly individuating and unfolding, right? So this is one way in which we can understand the idea of the self as never finished, as a process, which precisely, Heraclitus is the philosopher of change becoming the process, right? We'll go back to that when we see what Hegel says about this in relation to Heraclitus. So that's the idea of the self as the psyche, the soul is a self-increasing logos, a constant gathering, right, that never completes itself. I don't know if you want to say anything about this, but anyone? Okay. So, but I thought it was interesting to look at this as well. And okay, now, then let's maybe go back to fragment 2. This is a B2 from Sextus Empiricus. This is interesting in many ways as well. Logos is used here too. Right, again, Tony, you find it, but you also had the same edition as Tony?
Yeah, it's B2.
B2.
It's number 2, page 30.
Okay.
Page 30.
So you want to read it, Tony?
Sure. Should we read the first one too? Because I think...
But the first one we read, last time.
Yeah.
But you can read it again.
No, because then it says for this reason. So I was wondering, yeah, because it refers to that. The Logos holds always, but humans always prove unable to understand it, both before hearing it and when they have first heard it. For though all things come to be or happen in accordance with this Logos, humans are like the inexperienced when they experience such words and deeds as I set out, distinguishing each in accordance with its nature and saying how it is. But other people fail to notice what they do when awake, just as they forget what they do while asleep. For this reason, it is necessary to follow what is common. But although the logos is common, most people live as if they had their own private understanding.
Okay, so, and this is then a matter of interpretation, but it's interesting. This goes back actually, Eloy, to your question last time, the question about the relationship between the singular and the common, right? I mean, so it is this singular that happens precisely as I put it myself in the book that I just finished, right, at the threshold of the common, so it's an expression of the common, right? So it isn't necessary to follow what is common, right? But although the logos is common, the gathering, precisely the gathering at the threshold is common, and many people, he says, you know, then fall into their own private individual understanding, whereas the singular is this self-increasing process, self-increasing movement of the soul, as we saw in the previous passage, is precisely related to the common in that sense. It is precisely, you know, the expression of the common and what happens at the threshold, right? So, I mean, that was, I believe, this is a matter of interpretation, but it's interesting, right, because the common is, right, very important. It comes back in Heraclitus, and so then maybe anything that you may want to say, or another one, yeah.
No, I'm just thinking about what is it that constitutes the common? It's the becoming and the being and the non-being, right? The constant becoming.
Right.
And the relation between one's own private understanding and that, right? I think Hegel says that Heraclitus was sort of like, you know, he had disdain for a lot of the public, right?
Of course, that's typical of the description of Heraclitus.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
yes,
it's sort of
because
this.
ultimately the process itself that is being described is common. We saw that in the fragment about the cosmos. Remember this cosmos, which is neither made by the gods nor by humans, right? It is that too is the description of precisely the common. And there is another fragment that I want to relate.
That one reminds me of something we talked about before too with Adorno. And maybe we said this last week, I can't remember, but the whole notion of art, essentially.
Yes.
Where, I mean, we were talking about it before, but, you know, Adorno says that art, the society is immanent in art, essentially, not the other way around, right? And this kind of says something similar. It says, you know, the logos is common, like society is inherent or immanent in the logos, the universal or something in a sense, but we have this common perception of it coming from us as subject or as genius or something from the particular in a sense. That is an interesting
absolutely
notion.
Yeah. And then there is another one that I want to relate to this as well, which is again for us at least 11, B50 by Hippolytus. I don't know if you find it easily, but it says listening not to me but to the logos, right? You find it, right? What's the number?
It's in page
11.
number 42.
42. Yeah, page 42 in my edition.
Page,
But number 11.
number 11.
That's the logos, right?
Okay.
The logos, how does it start?
Listening not to me, but to the logos.
Yeah, you want to.
It is wise to agree that all things are one.
Okay.
B what?
Well, it's B50. Again, Eloy just read it. This is great too. No, I mean, again, that goes back to the two other, right? Also what you were saying, but the other fragments we read, right?
Yeah. And you were saying that Heraclitus, or Spinoza picks up on Heraclitus a lot too, right?
Well, we were saying the Xenophanes that Hegel makes the link
Okay.
And then, of course, Parmenides too. Yes.
Seems like one for Spinoza.
Oh yeah.
Not listening to me, but to the logos. It is wise to agree that all things are one.
Yes. Yeah, listening not to me but to the logos, I mean, it's really great. It is wise to agree that all things are one. If anything, maybe 12, the next one would be also maybe could be related somehow. Not one has to, but Spinoza and the question of nature, because he starts to define it, fuses, right? Nature loves to hide, right? Nature loves to hide, and actually I don't recall exactly where now, but Heidegger has a very interesting interpretation of this. I mean, of course, because he plays with the question of hiding, the concealed and the unconcealed, aletheia is the coming into unconcealment. But the nature loves to hide. One might say, possible relation certainly to, and according to what Heidegger says, the thinkers always think the same, and the same, not just one thinker thinks the same, but all of them ultimately, right? But certainly that Spinoza's formulation of nature is, of course, God. The one substance, which is God as well, but it is then this twofold situation that we find whereby nature is natura, and I spoke about this the first class, probably natura naturans and natura naturata, right? So I mean you have the manifestation of what then we see, and usually when I mean I do this also with in class with my students. Nature, what's the first association one makes with nature? Of course, the woods, the forest, right, the trees, the mountain, and so on and so forth. Whereas the potency, right, inside, so to speak, inside the potency, whereby then things happen, right? That it is not seen, but it's as much, it's actually that's where nature really is, where it happens, right? Both of them are, aspects, if you will, of nature. I mean, it is the same nature that can be understood in the active. I mean, nature producing itself, natura, naturans, and then nature after, let's say, the production has happened, produce nature. So the manifestation and the potency which remains unseen and which remains, in a sense, one might say, a mystery of a sort, right? I mean, nature goes to hide. This very small fragment is interesting in that sense, precisely, right?
And then the one, Stobaeus,
Yes.
where he says, right thinking is the greatest excellence, and wisdom is to speak the truth and act in accordance with nature while paying attention to it.
And what is this?
Oh, this is Stobaeus 22b112.
Oh, at the bottom of that page.
22?
Right thinking, yeah.
Oh yeah, right, yes. Okay, yes, that's right. So often then this is again.
Will we see when awake is there?
I was thinking
and okay.
in the nature loves to hide too, like reminds me of like when you're trying to think the totality or something, like nature as the totality, let's say. It's like always very difficult to uncover and to think the whole essentially. And it but that's kind of going to 112.
Right.
The right thinking is the greatest excellence. It's kind of this Hegelian, to me, like I read that sort of Hegelian kind of motif essentially,
So and again, totality is an open, of course, totality, right? Because we Heraclitus. I mean, there is this immanent situation that one also gets in Spinoza, of course, but then there is this openness of the totalization and yes, okay.
I have a question. It's always beautiful to be in this class. Last Saturday we were talking about the critique of Marcuse to logos, to the hegemony of logos, to the prominence of logos and the subordination of eros. And he said, and so in this context, logos is knowledge, right? Reason.
Yeah, although it is, I mean, in the context that you are speaking, yes, more so in the separation between logos and eros, but otherwise it is the gathering as well. But
The gathering,
yes.
okay. And so the one in this context, what is it?
The one?
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, nature is the one, fire, the process, right? I mean, it's again not the one in the sense of being one and then 2, 3 and so on. It is the only one, everything, like again, in the sense of the one substance in Spinoza, two, which there too there is this totality, open totality, this unfolding. I mean, certainly Hegel, but in Spinoza too, there is this constant unfolding of something that, you know, remains what it is. I mean, again, it is the absolute infinite substance that does not allow the existence of a second one, another one for reasons that we saw last time, of course, but it is not fixed. I mean, there is a movement, there is a process, there is an unfolding, right? And this is what in Spinoza too, naturans particularly, you know, addresses. Yes, but I want to go back to this question of eros and logos in a moment with Nietzsche. You know, that I wanted to make then a link very interesting between and of course Heraclitus and Nietzsche. There are so many things that, but two passages that I want to call attention to in Nietzsche. But before doing that, just because you read B 112, Tony, B 113 also, right? It's also part of this discussion. Thinking, right, is common to all.
Yeah. Which I thought was curious in some way, because of Hegel's, what I said before, because of Hegel's characterization of him as somebody who was sort of disdainful of the public and thought that they were sort of deceived and, you know, inferior to him in some way.
Right.
But
maybe there are multiple levels of thinking.
Right. There are multiple levels of the crowd. Maybe of the public as the serialization of the crowd.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because he's more for, of course, the singular. And
That's interesting, yeah.
yeah.
Again, that reminds me of this passage that you showed me of Adorno about art again.
Right.
You know, it's common to all thinking,
right,
you know.
Yeah.
And what you were saying, philosophers all sort of think the same.
Yeah.
The same.
Yeah, ultimately, yes, that is true. Actually, because even I forgot to say, when I was reviewing what we did, you know, we had done so far, the question what is it? Remember, we said that last time, the Heraclitus, he doesn't displace the question, of course, but he does say, look, I mean, this is actually not a problem, right? The fact that things change is not a difficulty, a problem, but it is actually what it is. That's the answer, if you will, that is the process of change becoming, that's precisely what you were looking for, reality. You don't have to look beyond, and so on and so forth. And this actually, this as well as what you were saying before, you know, in relation to Eros Logos, links to the Nietzsche thing that I was saying. So I first of all want to read this, because, you know, I mean, we can, there are many ways in which you can link Heraclitus to Nietzsche, but this is one wonderful passage, right, from Hippolytus, 81 in our edition B67, if you see it, right, I mean, in the
81. Okay.
God is day and night.
Yeah, you want to read?
Yes. God is day and night, winter and summer, war and peace, society and hunger, but changes the way. Fire, when mingled with perfumes, is named according to the scent of each.
Oh, weird.
Okay, so we have gas, we we have fire, but it's the same. I mean, remember I said last time that Burnett, for example, John Burnett, that I saw that you brought it. No, I know, that's Maria's. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't bring the Burnett, but just one says that fire is God. Hegel says that fire is the process, right? Again, it's not right the element in the same way, and Hegel says that clearly in the same way in which, right, water, air, and so on. It's not one of the elements exactly in the same way in which we saw that before, precisely because this fire is the process itself, because of what I was saying, that Heraclitus says, look, this is actually reality, you know, changing, it rests. If you remember, I recall the passage from last time. So there is nothing beyond. And
so
I
beautiful.
read
This is beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I just love it. Sorry. I love it. I think I got it away. God is day and night, winter and summer, war and peace, society and hunger, but changes the way when mingled with perfumes. Is named according to the secret of each.
Right. You want to know the passage from Nietzsche? You want to say something?
No, I mean, it reminds me, it's like the connection that I guess we were going to make originally to Descartes between Parmenides.
Yeah, we will, yeah.
And the sensuous, right?
Yeah.
The sensuous is sort of deceptive, right? So then what you would be picking up on with the senses through the perfume is not the fire itself, but the scent of the perfume, right? And so not necessarily the actual process of fire, right? But its effects, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, yes. There is also this relativism in Heraclitus, as we will see. But this is the passage from Nietzsche. By Nietzsche from, this is, I want to read one from Das of Zarathustra, and then another one from on the genealogy of morals, okay? This one says it's about the body, precisely, eros, for the body, instead of God, right? And we saw God is war and peace and so on in Heraclitus. Zarathustra in a section, Nietzsche in a section of Das of Zarathustra, in part 1, called On the Despisers of the Body, right? He says, the body is a great reason, a plurality with one sense, a war and a peace, just like Heraclitus.
Opposites, yeah.
Huh?
Opposites.
Yeah, opposite. Yeah, and then we will say more about the opposites in Heraclitus soon. A herd and a shepherd. An instrument of your body is also your little reason, if you will, logos understood as reason here, my brother, which you call spirit. A little instrument and toy of your great reason, which is the body. So in this sense, eros would be the great reason of logos, simply understood not as the gathering at the threshold, but as reason, as word, right? And then he also says the body, right? This is, I quote from Nietzsche again, does not say I, but does I. Right? It's wonderful, right? So again, the saying, or if you will, the logos understood in that sense, the body does not say, but does I. And then he says, there is more reason in your body than in your best wisdom. Okay, this is great. This is one of the greatest passages from Zarathustra, certainly from Zarathustra. But then there is another one which also connects to this discussion from on the genealogy of morals, which is, really. In a sense, a place, a moment when where Nietzsche calls into question the whole right metaphysics of, he wants to destroy, of course, the metaphysics in the sense of the Platonic, Judeo-Christian metaphysics of transcendence and the distinction between, the separation between essence, right, and appearance between being and becoming, and so on. And he has great passages about this also in The Will to Power. But this is from On the Genealogy of Morals, where he says, but there is no such substrate. So the whole underlying thing that we were looking for, not even with, there is no being, in Scarecrow, behind doing, affecting, becoming. The doer is merely a fiction added to the deed. The deed is everything, right? Which, again, this is so rich in implications, because one can say, well, the author as well the individual.
Sure.
Then,
What is deed in English? What does deed mean?
Like something that you do.
Okay.
Like they say, a good deed. Like,
deed.
Like,
Okay.
giving,
Like
giving
action.
to a charity or something.
Okay. Oh.
This is an action, a good deed.
Okay. So
Right.
you do.
To do, like from to act, action,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and here, of course, in this context, he also attacks on the Genealogy of Morals the question of the sovereign individual, master of a free will, and so on and so forth. But also, it really says something important about the general metaphysical question, and also the question of, because of course Nietzsche destroys metaphysics, but also, the basis for religion, as well as morality, of course. I mean, philosophizing with Eckhart, we were saying the other day, God. What happens to God in this context, right? The doer is a fiction added to the deed. Creation, God, and of course we know that God is dead. With Nietzsche, I mean, again, Zarathustra says that. This is interesting too. It is in many ways a reformulation of the basic ideas in Heraclitus, because if Hegel says that there is no proposition by Heraclitus that he has not used, that he did not use in his logic, but of course the same with Nietzsche, it's a very Heraclitean philosophy. Yes.
Oh, to me, I'll make the obvious Nietzsche reference is that every beast is driven to the pasture by blows, right? That's 75. Every beast is driven to pasture by blows.
75. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. This is.
I don't know. It's just Nietzsche and the herd animal, essentially.
Right.
And
Yes.
this kind of illusion ultimately. But that's an interesting. That is kind of an interesting statement. Driven to pasture, to peace by force, essentially, right?
Yes. Which is. It can also be related to the question of war.
The toil, how say there's something mandatory that you can't really.
Like an obligation?
Like something that you can't resist or completely, right? Refusal.
Yeah.
Toil, labor, determination, blows.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean the coercive type of the logic of our work, the logic of absolutely, or the logic of a capture, generally speaking, right? I mean absolutely.
A chapter on wage labor could start with this quotation.
No, it's true.
So, but because we have, you want to say more about this? Or?
I don't
know. Very, very interesting. But there is.
Again, Nietzsche to 77. To God, all things are beautiful and good and just, but humans have supposed some unjust and others just. Right.
Yes.
The relativity of morality. Of course.
Yeah, relative. Right. Yes. Exactly, and this also is, in this sense, there is, an anticipation of important themes that one finds also in certainly Spinoza and also Leopardi. I mean, because of course there is Spinoza and Leopardi are very close, philosophically, and then Leopardi, of course, was a big influence on Nietzsche. But the idea that both for the concept of nature that both Spinoza and Leopardi have, whereby nature does not care. Right, the idea, right, that to God all things are beautiful and good and just,
Right.
they are the opposite, whatever, it does not matter, but humans have then established their values precisely, suppose some just, others unjust, some right, wrong, good, evil, and so on and so forth, right? So I don't know if you're aware of this problem in Spinoza and Leopardi as well, which is
What problem?
the theme of the question of how nature does not care, right?
Oh.
I mean, how for Spinoza, the fact that we act with an end in view, that's part of it's a feature of the human condition. That's what we do. But when we ascribe the same to nature, then of course that's a big mistake, because there is no end in view the nature or God, the one substance, has, right? And so precisely, in any case, maybe we can then talk more about this, but in the appendix to part 1 of the Ethics, there is that great, discussion of this theme is precisely in which Spinoza says how many of these, ideas that we make are figments of our imagination, but again that nature itself or God does not act in the same way, but by its own necessity.
No, it reminds me of when I watched the Zizek lecture and his argument against the rhetoric on the environmentalist left of assigning to nature some type of suffering, some type of motherhood, some type of and him sort of reminding everybody it doesn't care.
Right.
We should be interested in it for ourselves, which is sort of almost a heretical statement if it's coming from the left, right? To be sort of this to recognize this self-interest and say, well, no, it's about us. It's not about it's not about taking care, so to speak. It's more
it's
about
our own survival.
Yes. Right, exactly.
Right, yes, but in fact when Zizek did that, was speaking about that, I immediately, made the association to precisely Spinoza and then Leopardi, but this is, again, in the appendix to part 1 of the Ethics, Spinoza says how, natural disasters and so on and so forth, there are those people who still now, right, they attribute these things to whatever, God, the gods. Actually the last occurrence of this was this guy, an athlete in Australia, who said that, the wildfires in Australia.
Apes have koalas, right? Or
the koala
the
was,
habitat.
right, there was that incident as well.
Yeah.
But this guy said that they were sent by God or something to
Oh,
extend to punish people because they passed, because of the law, the same-sex
Same-sex marriage.
No, it's a common theme on the religious right.
Yeah.
I've heard this before, but
From evangelical
It's a punishment.
especially.
Yeah.
Right, like the televangelist, what's his name, Robertson, who says that, Katrina happened, and so on and so forth. All these things, right? So this is precisely what Spinoza calls in the appendix to part 1 of the Ethics, the sanctuary of ignorance. Right?
Exactly.
He says precisely,
It's like a primitive understanding of nature, no?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
It's going back 4,000 years ago.
Right, the thunder and so on and so forth, that
because he's mad.
got upset and so on. But there are people thinking that way even today, and so Spinoza says how this is a common way that people have, and of course an incorrect way of thinking, whereby they confuse, they mistake the cause for the effect, and the effect for the cause, and so on. I mean, this is in Leopardi, but you know, right? No, Leopardi. But he says, precisely the same, and there is this wonderful poem, long poem by Leopardi, his last poem, right, which is called in English to be Wild Bloom. Bloom is the flower of the desert, right, and so on, which is about the eruption of the Vesuvio, the volcano in the area of,
right,
destroyed Pompeii. And
remember we did this.
Yeah. And he, no, you want to say?
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's a wonderful, long poem, philosophical poem, difficult as well, but there is one point in which he makes this wonderful analogy between, he says, just like an apple falling from a tree destroys an anthill, that, it took a long time, it took ants a long time to make a lot of work and effort to make the anthill, and then the apple, just by falling, destroy everything. He says the apple falls because, again, it has to fall, because it is ripe, and for no other reason. So the same, he says it is by the same logic, if you will, or by the same potency, that, an earthquake comes, or, a volcano erupts, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it had happened, and it will happen whether we're here or not. It's like the law of nature, and it's not against us, it's just because it is.
Right, and it is, that's right, and it is so, nature or God does nothing either, it's not against us or for us.
For us, it's just, it is.
Yeah, exactly, that's the point in Zizek. And so, in the Leopard, in this poem, at one point, he says literally that nature does not care. And there is another place in which he says the nature is a mother, but also, well, in Italian we say, we have this word matrigna, which is, it would be like a bad stepmother.
Like maternal? No, stepmother.
No, it's a kind of a negative.
Like a stepmother, okay.
Yeah. So, in the sense precisely that it's neither good nor bad what nature does. It does it simply because it does it.
Exactly, it's its own principles.
Right.
And hence the God is day and night, winter and summer, right?
Yeah.
If it's, both. Yeah.
Right. So
War and peace, satiety and hunger.
Yeah, so it is the same right here, and it is because of this that also one can link this back to the question that we were discussing about both the logos in the sense of the gathering, I would say, and the common, the threshold of the common, not the individual or whatever, group, interest, even in relation of understanding, natural phenomena and so on, but really, trying to relate to what is common, which is, the thinking is common. So it's not my, actually, interestingly, it is Heraclitus who says that Plato studied Heraclitus so carefully. The idea, if you will, the difference between opinions, right, and the truth. The common thinking is common, doesn't belong to anyone, any particular group, which is different from then of course in Plato the question of the distinction between opinion and truth will become very central, but it's the same idea, right? That as we usually say, people say, everybody's entitled to their opinion.
And
so
relativism, basically. A form of relativism?
Relativism, yes, exactly. There is a sense of relativism in Heraclitus, but different from what people, because, to be entitled to your opinion, so what? Again, if my opinion is wrong, why, but the question is the common, and therefore the truth, the logos is not a matter of entitlement. It's not that one is entitled or not entitled, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the idea that
But then, so thinking is common to all, right? And then also being and non-being is common to everything, right? And so there's this sort of parallel structure between the human thought that sort of produces all this, right? All the aphorisms and fragments that we have here. And sort of parallel structure in the physical world outside of the human, right?
Right, because you said being and non-being, but in this context, certainly of Heraclitus, as Hegel would say, it is precisely the truth of both of them
The
is
unity,
becoming.
yeah.
It is the past,
The unity of
the unity, right? The passing over of one into the other, the like coming to be. Okay, so but this is interesting. In any case, there is this. Important moment in Heraclitus. I mean, there are so many, again, implications in his thinking, both at the level precisely of, individuating reality precisely as the process of, this is right. I mean, in a sense of the process of individuation itself, becoming. With nothing behind, but then also this idea of nature and the relationship of the human being to nature and the adequate way in which one should could relate, right? And it is also this question of course, in Heraclitus, the question of the being and nothing, but in general, right, the opposites, right? I mean, the strife, not only the unity, but the strife that we remarked on last time with the idea of war as well, right? I mean, and actually there is I made a note of it because in Jean Burnet, there is a wonderful moment in which he says a passage. Brunet, right, who says that. Then I read the fragment relative to this. But he says Anaximander. This is Brunet, right, speaking about Anaximander and Heraclitus. He says Anaximander had treated the strife of opposites as an injustice. Remember the famous fragment that we saw? Because they had to pay penalty and retribution for the injustice, right? That's Anaximander, right? The things that are perish into those from which they come to be, because they had to pay penalty and retribution for the injustice. Then we saw the way in which then Heidegger completely differently, right, translated this as the usage instead of necessity and so on. But what I want to call attention to here is that Burnet says that differently from Anaximander, what Heraclitus set himself to show was that, on the contrary, strife was the highest justice.
Strife?
Strife.
What is strife? Sorry.
like struggle.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually he's referring to this fragment, which is fragment of passage 57 in the Curl book. It would be 62 in that Burnet, right? But you want
57?
57.
It is necessary to know that war is common and justice is strife, and that all things happen in accordance with strife and necessity. Right?
Yes.
That's the one?
This is the one to which he's referring to. So it is necessary to know, again, necessary and then necessity, and that again we saw that in Anaximander. But as Burnet says, the opposite happens. It is not a matter of injustice, but it is actually what brings about, of course, not in the legal sense of justice and not
fairness.
Fairness, but also I would say that it is simply what it is, right? I mean, in relation to what we were saying before, because of course, I mean, the tsunami that destroys a city, I mean, of course, that's not good for the people living in the city, but as such, in itself, again, it is neither good nor bad, and so on and so forth, right? So, but it is, something like that. So, not war in the sense, of course, of the typical way in which we think of war, and we made reference to this last time. 258, the next fragment, war is the father of all things, and so on.
Yeah, for some reason I'm thinking of my main objections, I guess, to utopian thinking, right? That struggle finishes one day, right? And we arrive someplace, and it's okay suddenly, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and of course that's a very important point,
Yeah.
because also addresses the question, right? I mean, especially in the human context, then of course of desire, right? And therefore again, a question of the body, eros, but desire, and those who say that the human being is not a desiring machine, right? A machine of desire, from Deleuze, right, and Gattari, Spinoza, Hobbes, right? For whom, right, in Leviathan, he says, taking issue precisely with Aristotle, he says, well, there is no ultimate good and final end, right, whereby you have you're satisfied and so on and so forth, because that's the same as death. I mean, life is this constant.
It's about movement. No?
Movement and strife. Yes.
And the movement is the contradiction, ultimately.
Right.
It reminds me of the desire one, actually. When you said desire, it reminds me of 38, B54. An unapparent connection, harmonia, is stronger than the apparent one.
Oh yeah, yes. I was going. Yeah, that's.
It's a good one, though. I mean, that's my favorite.
No, yeah. And then we will read this together with also 59, 60, and 61 in a moment. But that's right. And there too, Burnett, for example, says something interesting in that sense. But even the next. Fragment that is similar to this, but you want to say something?
I mean, to me, it was just, what speaks stronger than the apparent connection is our desire for whatever, in a way, fabricated or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also, I think, is a very interesting way to think about the contradiction as well, right? That to us, the sort of disharmony, the atonal music or something is stronger to us in some sense than the sort of melodic harmony.
Reminds me of the thing you pointed out last week, the most beautiful arrangement.
That was
is a pile of things poured out at random, the randomness corresponding to the unapparent connection.
Exactly.
Which is in the unharmony.
Right.
Which is really...
Yeah,
Discord,
it was the fragment that about
the cosmos. It was
right.
Yeah, I don't remember what number it was.
Okay.
I think it was at the end somewhere.
Okay, well, we'll find it, but yes, but the idea of harmonia precisely, which is precisely the unity of opposites, right? I mean, and strife. This is Burnett again, who says the strife of I'm quoting, the strife of opposites is really an attunement.
An attunement?
Attunement, which translates the Greek harmonia. It's the same.
That's nice.
Right? So, but it is really the strife of opposites, right? So it's not the quiet of
No, I thought that earlier when we were talking about unity of opposites, it almost sounds like a settled matter because of the word unity. Like it's the, you know, it's settled, right? It's just, it is, you know. But actually that, yeah, it's a, I think a deceptive phrase. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the translation.
No. Well, which one? The one that just.
No, the phrase unity of
Unity,
opposites,
yeah.
because then we forget about strife.
I see.
Yeah, but in fact, I mean, it is a unity which keeps within itself the opposition, which never, yeah. And I said that at one point, maybe also with the Athenists, we'll make reference to Chinese philosophy, Taoist, yeah. But precisely there too, I don't know if we mentioned this, but I can mention it now, but in the famous and now very popular symbol and concept of yin and yang, right? But I mean, that's the same idea, right? I mean, the yin, the yang, the yin within the yang within the yin, not only so. But I remember this actually from a class that I took many years ago in Italy, but this wonderful professor of philosophy who was also interested in Chinese philosophy, among other things, and he said how, in reality, the symbol of the yin and yang is not the juxtaposition of two halves, right? But it is actually one stroke that makes the whole symbol. I mean, it's one and the same. I don't know. You see, I mean, the symbol is drawn by one, stroke.
Right.
Precisely, and that's very interesting because it changes everything. I mean, again, it's not that you put together two different things and juxtapose them, but it is one and the same in its unfolding movement that produces both of them. So there is a kind of unity. I completely agree with you. I mean, it's maybe that's the question of language too. When we say the one and so on, and we have to say, but it's not the one in the sense of one and so on. It's not a unity as a unity precisely, but it is the distinction within the unity, right? The unity that has within itself the distinction of opposites. Yeah. But the thing of yin and yang, right?
This is the deed too. The act too, the deed as well, right? The way.
Which is the
act of being. Like,
the one
reminds me
stroke,
of what you read earlier from Egypt.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
The one stroke.
Which is precisely the yes, exactly, that you cannot distinguish and this is what then is developed also, by thinkers in the phenomenological tradition and so on. They write the question about the body after its recovery, recuperation, if you will, by then after the myth of the body with Descartes and then Spinoza, Nietzsche, and so on, and then the phenomenological tradition. There is a lot. Which the body takes again a center stage, and there is a moment, right, in Merleau-Ponty, where he says, for example, Merleau-Ponty, when if I write, it's not that I use my hand to write, but I am my hand writing, right? I become precisely, I am that thing. So it's not that, there is this separation, and therefore that there is a command given to, say, the hand or whatever to move, right? And then it moves accordingly, but it is this more fluid situation.
Experience is important.
Yeah, experience, and also this immanent type of situation whereby precisely the doer is the deed. The body is, and this is, again, because we made a reference to the yin and yang, but one wonderful example of this would be Tai Chi, right? When extremely slow motion, right? It precisely means this, that it's not that you have your arm move or your leg and so on, and they move accordingly, but you become precisely that movement. You are in that movement, right? It is precisely in the act.
Yeah, it's like the commodity. in Marx, right? The accumulated labor in the commodity, and the worker self, investing the commodity and then.
No,
I see some vague, some hazy connection.
the commodity would be, however, a matter of separation from.
No, it would be, but it still has within it the sort of. Well, maybe I'm thinking of the machine. Never mind.
No, living labor, yes. It's the
machine,
fetishism. It's the origin of fetishism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the things are, they have our living, they embody in some
Yeah,
ways
embody.
our labor invested
Right.
in them.
Oh.
And so
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, yes.
So
It's that
they develop their own, they say their own.
But then they take on their own life, yeah.
a kind of machinic assemblage, which is also an amplification of something. Yes. Right, but in any case, I mean, I think that this, maybe we'll go back to some of these relations, but certainly this link also to the Taoist tradition is very important because there are many similarities between the Presocratic tradition in general and the ancient Taoist tradition, yes. But together with 38, right, an unapparent connection, harmonia, the attention is stronger than an apparent one. I want to read some other fragments that relate to this, but also I want to call attention to the relation of this fragment, passage, and the one that we read earlier, nature loves to hide. Right? Because this unapparent is precisely that movement that we spoke, the potency that is precisely invisible, unapparent, but where the connection, which is, by the way, connection, harmony, but also in a sense, again, one goes back to the gathering somehow, stronger than an apparent one. But then, this is 59, B8. Tony?
59?
Sorry.
B8. Just I was calling attention to your. This is Aristotle from Nicomachean Ethics.
When it's opposed together?
Yes. You want to see it? Oh no? You found it?
Yeah.
You had the same.
Edition? Yeah.
Right, Estonia.
It's here, it's here, page number 47.
Oh, 47 is like in our
Yeah.
Oh, you had the second edition? Or you had,
we have that on
don't know
the
which
PDF.
edition I have.
What is opposed?
Yeah.
What is
Okay,
opposed?
yeah, what is opposed brings together the finest harmony, is composed of things at variance, and everything comes to be in accordance with strife.
It's a good one.
That's beautiful, yeah.
Right? So again, harmony comes back, the opposition, and things at variance, and yes, I mean, it's the coming together, the gathering, the coming together, which I agree, again, Tony, with you, it's not really a matter of unity in any right common understanding of the world, right, yes. And then 60 also, 60 would be also, and then 61.
Which one? Sorry.
Things
Well,
taken together.
be there.
Is
the next one?
In the next.
Oh, okay,
The next
51.
one.
Okay, okay. This here?
Oh, you want
This
this
one?
Well,
No,
there's
no,
the-
no.
Oh, no, once.
What's the next one?
B10. Could be things taken together are whole and not whole. Something that is being brought together and brought apart. In tune and out of tune. Out of all things there comes a unity, and out of unity all things.
Right, I mean, so again, it's the strife of opposites, which, by the way, since we made reference to Lao Tzu and the Taoist tradition, there too, same idea. But So to be whole and not whole, to be, and we saw the other day also the unity of with the paradox of the river, to one steps into and one does not step into, we are and we are not, and so on and so forth. But this is from Aristotle, by the way, right? By Aristotle from On the Wall. But this is another description, if you will, of the open totality that we were speaking about before, the open totalization, the open totality of the singular, precisely that singular which is self-increasing, not only at the level of elementary human life, but also at the level of everything that is, right? I mean, the universe in infinite expansion, perhaps, yes.
No, just a question. You're saying singularity.
See, I say singularity is an open totality.
Yeah.
It's a totality that remains open, precisely, right? I mean, there has nothing beyond, but that doesn't mean that, it is finished, closed. It remains open, right? So, but that's fundamentally the idea that we have, by and large, always in place in Presocratic philosophy, or ultimately any philosophy, certainly of immanence, right? I mean, again, that would be the same in the Taoist tradition, but also in modern philosophies of immanence. I mean, we made reference also, before we spoke about the absolutely infinite substance in Spinoza, and again, so there is this idea of a totalization, if one wants to use that language, that remains open, however, right?
The open
An
dialectic.
individuation.
Yeah. An open dialectic, you're saying,
Open
instead of
dialectic.
the closed idealist dialectic.
Yeah, open dialectic, right, or and in any case also this individuation that, then of course, we spoke about Simon Donkey, then distinguishes, of course, between, the domain of the living being and the physical individuation, which is different from psychic and collective, but at the same time, ultimately this idea of either the open dialectic or what Simon Don also calls transductive thinking, transduction,
Inductive or deductive or transitive.
Okay.
which remains always there. I mean, something that constantly unfolds. And one might ask the question, well, then it unfolds where? What is the place of this? That would be also not, I mean, that's beyond, of course, my competence, but even the idea of not the universe in infinite expansion, right? One might ask the question, expanding into what exactly? And it doesn't expand in anything, other than itself. Right, we will see this ultimately also again with Parmenides next time, although we had the problem of the plenitude, but in any case, we will talk about that as well. But, and with Zeno, Parmenides' student who will then deny place altogether with a paradox, right? But the question is, if it constantly expands, and if there is nothing beyond, again, the place of this expanding is ultimately an interesting problem. But there is nothing, not even nothingness, maybe Heidegger would say, in which it expands. So it is the self-producing, again, and the self-grounding movements of unfolding that never ends. Yes. Oh, I thought it just...
No, I was just...
Yeah, but this is fascinating in many ways, and so this is the open totality. And then 61 also, and this is a fragment on which John Burnett, again, I didn't bring the book, but I can give you the reference, page 146. If you go to the Burnett, he remarks on this in interesting ways as well. But the fragment from Heraclitus says they do not understand how, though it variance with itself, which is already interesting because it defies that precisely concept of the unity and of the self-sameness, right? It is different from itself. So though it varies with itself, it agrees with itself. Again, it's the question of the contradiction and right, the unity of opposites, right? And then it is a backwards turning attunement. The word for attunement is harmony, and then harmonia in Greek. Okay, the same word that we saw before. And this John Burnett says that. Okay, that's the example. Okay. So, but in any case, this is interesting. But this is where, from page 145, this is what I read earlier probably. John Burnett says the strike of opposites is really an attunement, harmonia, this harmony, which is again at variance with itself. It agrees with itself. We are and we are not. Again, it is this the movement in Heraclitus of the time. You know, in the process, and then because I wanted to also read from Hegel, especially when he speaks about this question of the process, fire, and so on. But before doing that, maybe we should also look into the Marx quote the last time we forgot to read.
Labor of Fire?
Yeah, from the Grundrisse. Then I use it in Labor of Fire.
The next one is really good for phenomenology too, right?
Which one?
62. All things that can be seen, heard, experienced. These are what I prefer.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. What'd you say?
For the phenomenologist. 62.
Close.
B55.
Yeah.
B50.
Yeah.
From
Hippolytus.
But then there is the other one that has come after, which is the prominence of the I. And I think eyes are, and I think that the logos is and it refers to me a lot. It talks to me a lot about what we were discussing on Saturday about logos and eros. And the next one says, eyes are more accurate witness than the ears. No, so
Right.
so objectivity is
Yeah.
the reason, the what we can see, what the empiricism, the objectivity is more important than what we hear.
Yeah. And the next one also is wonderful, I believe, because it combines this they are talking about, this phenomenological type of situation, but also the relativism in epistemology, but as well.
If all things were smoke, nostrils would distinguish them.
Right? Yeah.
I like that.
That's
Nostrils.
Yeah.
What is nostrils?
And
He privileges smell a lot, right?
Huh?
He likes smell.
This
Oh,
part.
yeah, he speaks about that.
From here down.
Yeah, I mean, just before we move on to the other, I mean, I think also to Hegel, maybe there are these other passages where maybe we read some of them last time about the epistemological relativism, or we didn't.
I think we did, but we can reread some if you want.
Okay, like 74, B37, pigs.
Oh no, we didn't read that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wash themselves in mud,
Yeah,
birds in dust or ash.
true. I see. That's an interesting one for epistemology.
Which one is it?
Oh, the one you had read, Josh, was 78 in our edition. This is
Yeah, exactly.
the one that I just read, is B37. I mean, 74 in my edition, but
74,
B37.
Okay, 74. Which is about farming.
So the truth is relative to the being, I guess. The truth is relative to framework, essentially.
Where you stand.
Yeah.
Where you stand.
Yeah, that's right. And then this is what then again comes. Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's not denying that the truth exists. Pigs wash themselves in mud. It's not denying the truth in that relative to any particular standpoint.
Right.
You know, it's saying that they're all true, but they're sort of parallel to each other. You have to
Right.
draw distinctions from all of them.
Yeah. But this is also important in not the sense of phenomenology, no? And in addition to the general question of epistemological relativism, but it is not, I mean, not in the most simple, simplistic way of understanding it, I believe, because first of all, Nietzsche too, then, I mean, everything is perspectival. I mean, that's what Nietzsche says, there is only perspectival knowing and so on and so forth. I mean, of course, the perspective, right, the point of view and so on and so forth is fundamental, but that doesn't mean that anything goes.
Right.
Right, because remember,
Exactly.
thinking is common, and
Right.
the common, everybody has ideally access to the common. But it is also a matter of we will see this also next time, maybe when we make the link between Parmenides and Descartes. But certainly that's the idea, that the fact that we never see, and this will come back with Descartes too. We never, you know, if we relied on whether it's the ears or the eyes, I mean, on the senses, we would not be able to speak about reality ultimately, because what we see is always always an aspect
Right.
of the thing, right? I mean, there is this. Okay, maybe next time we'll go into that.
No, it's nice.
So in any case, yes, there are these other passages, just like pigs 71, pigs rejoice in mud more than in pure water, but maybe we read this last time. I don't recall now.
I don't think so.
Oh no, but you see it? 51? No, I'm sorry.
71.
It was, 71.
So all these ones where he's making these kinds of crazy comparisons, beautiful apes, etc. These are all about epistemology ultimately,
Yeah, and
in general.
and this is also, by the way, there is here link then also to connection to Xenophanes, because remember the wonderful passage by Xenophanes about if horses could draw, they would make God like horses and so on and so forth. And how
Right.
things are relative in this sense, even in the the question of knowing, but also construing the real, constructing reality.
Interesting.
About, we're going to repeat the last sentence about what?
Constructing reality.
Constructing reality, okay.
Pigs rejoice in mud more than in pure water.
Yeah, that's also, but there are some other similar fragments. But let me maybe use this one to get into the Marx quote in a moment, and then we see some Hegel. This is 49 in B90, right? Plutarch. And the passage reads, Josh, you find it? You want-
Yeah, all things are in exchange for fire, and fire for all things, as goods for gold, and gold for goods.
Right? I mean, that's also very interesting, no? And an exchange, right? I mean, again, so fire, again, because we'll get into the question of fire as a process and so on, but it is also what, everything is precisely, everything is, so then when Marx will then speak about the universal equivalent, right, with which everything can be exchanged. I mean, of course, there is also a link, a connection to this. But the great passage in Marx, which is from the Grundrisse, page 361, is labor, right, is the living, form-giving fire. It is the transitoriness of things, their temporality as their formation by living time.
That's crazy.
Could you say it again?
Yes, labor is the living, form-giving fire. It is the transitoriness of things, their temporality as their formation by living time, where again, time again is fire, the process becoming change once again. And this is Lego, then for Marx, this living Lego, of course, right? And I mean, maybe in this sense we could also see some of the things that Hegel says about this. You know, maybe I go to page 287 and then we go back to some other important passages in Hegel as well. But on page 287, precisely Hegel speaks of
Oh, in Hegel, okay.
oh yeah. I mean, fire as a process and also time. So I read these few lines from. Sorry, then I go to page 288. 287, 288.
Is it under B?
B, yes. Although just before getting to B, the line before that, right, the end of the previous paragraph, where he says time is the first form, right? Heraclitus to define time as the first form of becoming.
Yeah.
And then I skip the first three lines. Then he says, in time, we had the moments of being and non-being manifested as negative only, or as vanishing immediately. I skip the next 2.5 lines. To Heraclitus, the truth is to have grasped the essential being of nature, i.e., to have represented it as implicitly infinite, as a process in itself. Again, right, I mean, we don't have to look beyond, as it is the process itself. And consequently, this is in a sense what I was saying, consequently, this is, it is evident that to us that Heraclitus could not say that the primary principle is air, water, or any such thing. They are not themselves process, but fire is process. Okay, so fire is really not one of the many elements in, right, the list of, I mean, it's water, air, no, fire is different from the others. It's not, yeah.
No, and then the next, if you skip the next sentence. Fire is physical time, absolute unrest, absolute disintegration of existence, the passing away of the other, but also of itself.
Because it consumes itself.
Right, exactly, which is what we saw in Heraclitus, this cosmos that was made neither by the gods nor by humans, is a never lasting fire. Right, I mean, that's what they remember. I mean, I can read that again. That goes. Okay, let me just find it. Yeah, because this cosmos 45, fragment 45. This cosmos, the same for all. Again, once again, common, the same for all. None of the gods nor humans made. But it was always in this and shall be a never-living fire, kindled in measures and extinguished in measures. Yeah. So yeah, that's the idea. So it is the passing away of the other, also itself. And that's why he says Heraclitus logically call fire the notion, the logos of the process. The notion, of course, for Hegel then becomes this very important concept, notion, right? I mean, the notion of the process. So fire is not, again, one of the many elements to be added to the list. I don't know if it's proper to say that in a sense it is a metaphorical expression. It is maybe more than that. I mean, in the sense that then ultimately everything is one might say, in some ways, fire, really, right? But it is again not the element. It is the process itself that precisely never stops. So page 288 is also important. He further made this fire to be a real process, right? I mean, we can think about energy and so on, because its reality is for itself the whole process. The moments can become concretely determined, and then fire. This is beautiful, I believe. Fire as the metamorphosis of bodily things. I mean, we see that not the closeness to Marx, to the the passage by Marx. Yeah. The metamorphosis of bodily things is the transformation and exhalation of the determinate. For this process, Heraclitus used a word, evaporation, but a particular word, but it is rather transition, the transitoriness, right? We saw in Marx the transitoriness of all things. I read that again because labor, it's important. Labor is the living, form-giving fire. It is the transitoriness of things, their temporality is their formation by living time. Okay, and it is where the key gets into time as well.
The transitoriness.
Transitoriness of all things.
Okay.
Of things. I'm sorry, not of all things. And yeah, I mean, but we saw the question of time on page 287. So that's what it is. And by the way, just because I happen to, just see this, I mean, speaking again about the metamorphosis of fire on page 289, but then I want to go back to some previous passages, previous pages, but he says at the beginning of the middle paragraph, nature is thus a circle, which is something that Heraclitus, of course, says, right? The end and the beginning are the same, in a circle, and so on and so forth. Nature that hides, that loves to hide, that is a circle. Okay, so I don't know if there are comments on about this, but of course page 288, what I read from page 288, right, the last passage about fire, the metamorphosis and so on and so forth, we made the link to Marx and Simon Don as well, with the process of individuation and transaction. We had also.
I don't. Norm. I think it's not so strict.
But usually, around this time
they want to go.
That's great. They start at 7 in the morning.
Really?
Yeah, I asked the guys, I do from 7 to 9, so.
Yeah.
He wants to go home.
So, but what's interesting is also
She said the guards come in at 7 in the morning.
Yes.
And they leave at 9.
Yeah, because the first and last time I came, I asked since when, because he was looking tired. He said, I came at 7 and then I leave at 9.
Oh, really?
I think they all do, but at least some do.
Oh,
well, you were fired, huh?
They were fired.
Well, maybe like I said, then it will be next time that we get to Parmenides, because again, we don't have to, and we couldn't even, start at this point, right? So maybe we end with some of this Heraclitus, Hegel, again, on Heraclitus. Maybe there were other things that I want to say, but
Hegel didn't write very much on Parmenides.
Yeah, that was short.
Yes, although he says that Parmenides is a striking figure, right? He begins with this idea that Parmenides is a striking figure in the Eleatic tradition. Yeah, but of course, he's much closer to Heraclitus, and he says that, right?
Yeah.
So, page 282, for example, he does say, he says that with Heraclitus we have the notion is making, right, I don't know if you see that, it's like after speaking about how Plato, like I was saying before, studied the philosophy of Heraclitus, right, which is interesting because then of course Plato is, he distances himself from Heraclitus in many ways. In some ways, one might say that there is a coming together of Heraclitus and Parmenides in Plato, as well as Pythagoras, but certainly the ideas of forms are beyond, right, what Heraclitus is speaking about. Ultimately, right, it is at the level of only the appearance and the level of opinion that, he saves that moment of transitoriness, Plato. But that's not what the truth is for Plato, right? So, in any case, he says he studied Heraclitus with special diligence, so much so that Heraclitus can be called Plato's teacher. And then he says, but in Heraclitus we find the notion making its appearance. Right, which is very interesting. The notion, we already saw, the logos, thinking, which is common to all, and a few lines below, this is still in the middle paragraph, right? But after what I read, I skipped 4 or 5 lines. In Heraclitus, we see the perfection of knowledge, so far as it has gone. And then so on and so forth. Okay, but the next paragraph, that starts with the number 1. Concerning the universal principle, this bold mind, Aristotle tells us, first uttered the great saying, and this is Aristotle speaking, being and non-being are the same. Everything is and yet is not. We are and we are not. We saw that in Heraclitus last time. And this is really great, right? Everything is and yet is not. We spoke briefly about this last, but this is the central moment of all dialectical thinking, right? Which is, again, something that will escape the mind of course, will escape positivistic thinking, or the typical analytic philosophy type of approach. Like I said the other day, you must disambiguate either this or that. The more right, that you were saying is precisely this being and non-being, which is then the process, like the coming to be of everything becoming strange and so on. But should we go? Because maybe they don't close the
I don't know. We'll wrap it up.
Well, maybe I read just a few lines, and then maybe next time briefly we go back by way of reviewing Heraclitus. But the truth only is precisely as the unity of distinct opposites, and indeed of the pure opposition of being and non-being. But with the Eleatics, that we will see next time with Parmenides, we have the abstract understanding that being alone is the truth, right? And we say, in place of using the expression of Heraclitus, that the absolute is the unity of being and non-being. So in a sense, this is maybe simplistic, but in a sense, as much as I have always liked Parmenides very much, the next time we'll speak about Parmenides, but it is true that in a sense Heraclitus is more, his thought is more complete, because he, according to Hegel too, he still reaches into the absolute, but in a much better way than the Eleatics try to do, but because the Eleatics will do so by only looking abstractly at being and completely removing nothing, but whereas in Heraclitus there is this moment of course, greatly appreciated by Hegel, but it is true that in a sense it seems to really catch the sense of the real in a much more precise way. Yes, and therefore the question of individuation, the constant. Okay, so we just
Just don't turn the lights off.
All right.
I
Yes.
think they want you to put chairs back.
Yes.
Tonight.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so we finish here.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Bruno.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Very,